This is Tales from the Pros, where business leaders and influencers share their stories of inspiration, struggles, and successes. And I'm your host, Michael Giorgio. Hey everyone, welcome to Tales from the Pros, and this is Michael Giorgio, your host and co-founder of Imagine Ovation. My wonderful guest with me here today is a serial entrepreneur, investor, and founder and CEO of Gupshup, the world's leading messaging and bot platform, used by over 30,000 developers that handle nearly 4 billion messages per month. Gupshup also developed Teamchat, a smart messaging app that introduced structured templates to messaging. He also previously founded and led Elance, the pioneer of online freelancing, and which is now known as UpWork, and is also a publicly traded company. Please welcome Beerud Sheth. Beerud, I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Michael, thanks for having me here. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. So, Beerud, I can relate a little bit to you. I've obviously done some research on you and your background and your story, and I really like what I've seen. And obviously, you've accomplished a lot, and you've seen a lot of successes over lots of hard work, many years of hard work. This podcast really, Tales from the Pros, is it's really focused on business storytelling, and I love interviewing founders such as yourself who have been through so much and really experienced the whole process from startup to even an IPO and all of that, right? So that's where I really want to I want to get started here is if you can tell us a little background on how you really got to this position where you are today. I'm sure many people have asked you that before, but just in a maybe a short few minutes, how on a high level did you reach where you are at least right now?
I don't know, a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, right? Everybody needs that. But no, just to back up a little bit, I think, just a combination of all your experiences. You take a problem solving approach, you take a growth mindset, you have to learn, you have to scale, you need an intense work ethic. You're always on and so on, right? You have to be a good listener, right? You have to listen to what the market's telling you, what the competition's telling you, what investors are telling you. When you're too close to something, you lack perspective. So the outside-in perspective from others helps. Customers in particular tell you a lot of things about your own business, so it's important to listen. And then when opportunities present themselves, right? Call it luck, call it, market changes, things like that. You have to be open to them, aware of it. Or the converse, right? Sometimes when bad things happen, like an external financial crisis, no fault of yours, but when that happens, it really shakes up everything. So you just have to be open to, you have to be dynamic, nimble, agile. And then I think perhaps the most difficult thing really is just grit and determination and perseverance to sort of stick it out, right? I think because even in the the common joke in Silicon Valley is, some, like say in my case, UpWork was an overnight success, 20 years in the making, right? It just takes a really long time. And I think it sounds glib after the fact, but while you're going through it, right, those years really, they age you, it's a grind, it can be difficult and so on. But it's not, I'm not complaining in the sense that, if you really enjoyed, you're in it, then the journey is itself the reward as much as the destination and so on. So I think we can unpack each of these things. There's a lot of things that go into it. But yeah, I think it just, some of the elements that I mentioned. Yeah.
And going back to Elance a little bit, giving, let's just say web development, mobile development freelancers the opportunity to find jobs and all of that, right? That was back before 2000, correct?
Oh yeah, that was, we started in December 98. That's right.
Wow. And Did you at that point really see a problem in the market? Was that, or just you knew that there was a gap? Were there not many platforms at that time? Is that where you thought you kind of would enter into the space, or were there some competitors and you just thought you could do it better?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We were preaching remote work 20 years ago, and I was joking with some of my co-founders that not that I wish the pandemic to happen, but if it had to happen, where was it 20 years ago when we needed it to evangelize remote work? But today we all take it for granted, the benefits of it and the adoption of it, right? But 20 years ago it was very challenging. I mean, people would say, no, I can't trust somebody who I can't meet face to face. How am I going to pay them? What if they run away with my money? What if they don't, work in the same time zone I do? What if they, don't understand or speak my language, etc. I mean, there was just all of these. Honestly, there were just mental barriers, really. But for a business, it can be challenging as you're evangelizing these things, right? So, but I think at that time, what I saw really was it's just a combination of my own personal influences, really, right? For example, I grew up in India, in Mumbai. I studied at IIT and then came here for grad school at MIT. I was doing computer science, and then I did a short stint on Wall Street. I was a bond trader, if you will, right? So there were like three. So I was in my 20s, right? So my limited life then, I had my three formative influences really were I came from India, and I knew that there are a ton of smart, bright people all over the world in India and elsewhere, Brazil, Turkey, you name it, because so you have a global talent pool. The other is with my studies in computer science and so on, you knew that internet was making it easy to connect with anybody anywhere,
Yeah.
right? And then the last thing was sort of given my Wall Street experience, I knew you could create a marketplace even for illiquid securities or unstructured items like services, right? When you want to see, it's one thing to have a marketplace for products where everybody knows exactly what it is, right? But when it's a service like web design, web development, and how much does it cost? Well, it depends on what the scope is, right? So anyway, these three influences sort of, were just sitting in my head, and my co-founders then, we were just brainstorming. And really, it took even just going from sort of an inspiration to an idea and refining it, what categories, how does the product work, what could break, how do you protect the buyer, the seller, and so on, right? And then even once you get past the product, how do you market it? How do you get people around the world to hear about it? How do you get businesses here and so on? So I think, but really just seeing the fact that, you have these massive paradigm shifts happening, and literally the way I like to describe it is, you're really just connecting the dots, right? And there's a saying, right? The future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So if you just see that these things are happening and should happen in much bigger scale, and you sort of get on with it, you build something that enables it and drives it, makes it happen. I think that's how we came up with Elance.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned a lot of great points, Beerud. I know many people can learn from you, learn from this story, and and this is just my opinion. I think there's a big problem with a lot of startups, because I've dealt with hundreds of startups where actually I can relate to Elance a little bit, or UpWork, because so we actually me and my brother-in-law own a app development technology company for the last 10 years. So we can definitely understand about trying to find new developers and new resources. But, I think there's a stigma out right now that it's, it kind of like a lot of these startups, they think it's easy to start a business because they see all these things on Facebook and Instagram, and they see all the good things, but they don't realize the work and the grind that happens behind the scenes, and I think that's a big problem. And I like how you mentioned before, it takes, it was a startup over after 20 years, you know what I mean? It just took so long, and it's a very long process. It's rigorous. It's a lot of trials and tribulations, a lot of making mistakes, learning from them, ups and downs. And, it's just really good to to let people know that, that's not really the reality of it. Is to have something successful, it takes a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of hustle and perseverance and resilience. So, for you, when you Beerud, when you were growing Elance, or even the company you have right now, and Gupshup, did you experience the same types of obstacles in growing both of those SaaS companies, or was it very, very different? Was it a lot easier for you to grow Gupshup than it was for you to grow Elance because you had all that experience?
Oh, certainly. I mean, look, one is the external ecosystem keeps improving. And then, of course, your own experience set keeps increasing as well, right? So both of those make a huge difference, right? And let me elaborate. Like I remember this was in the late 90s. In fact, we started because I was in New York on Wall Street. The first year of Elance was literally in New York. We started in a 2-bedroom apartment. I mean, it was hard to get even a lease, right? Because the landlords would ask us for 5-year lease with substantial upfront deposits, because they're used to all these Wall Street tenants who could easily do that. And as a startup, I mean, we didn't even have a planning horizon, didn't go beyond like 3 or 6 months. So, but a lot of these basic things have changed now, right? Certainly New York is a great hub for startups and so on. But just basic things like that, or even employees not understanding how compensation works in startups, where the cash is lower than Wall Street firms, but equity is higher, and that's where the real value is. Onto the tech infrastructure, right? And back at that time, you had to buy expensive servers and databases and host it and maintain it and manage it. Now everything's on the cloud. It's pay as you go. It's instant, and very cost effective to get started. Right. So in a lot of ways, the external ecosystem has changed. I think employees, the talent pool is much wiser about equity, wealth, and so on. So that's on the external side. I think as a personal journey, of course, again, I think what a lot of people don't realize is the psychological journey of an entrepreneur is a very significant part of the overall success. And, it just needs a mental fortitude to deal with the roller coaster ride, the high highs and the low lows, right? I think it's really, you just have to be even keeled about it, deal with it, be open-minded, be flexible. When something doesn't work, instead of getting discouraged, you sort of really get into what didn't work and why, and what did we learn from it to then improve on it and get better. Because tech startups in general, you're operating in uncharted territory, right? You're trying to push the limits, the frontier. Right. And once you just accept that, then inherently, the only way to innovate, the only way to get forward is to try certain things that are risky. There's no guarantees of success. And therefore, when it fails, again, it's not a personal failure. It's really it's part of the process, right? So you but just use it to keep getting better and so on. So I think certainly as you have experience in dealing with employee situations, in, being, and you have more credibility, right? So I think it helps. Fundraising becomes easier, recruiting becomes easier, dealing with board dynamics. I think you anticipate, you sort of, you're not just reacting, you have a little bit more control over what you're doing and so on. So yeah, makes a huge difference, certainly. When I look myself as a rookie entrepreneur, there were a lot of mistakes I made. And again, I don't regret any of them because they helped me grow and learn. But for new entrepreneurs, they should learn from others' mistakes as much as they can, so they don't have to make their own. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And let's go to Gupshup a little bit. What made you, and I'm not sure if you have any partners, but what made you really start that company? And I know it's pretty big in India, right? Have you guys? Is it also you have a lot of users here in the U.S. as well and all over the world with that platform?
Yes, we are expanding globally now, and you're going to see more of it happening, certainly in the U.S. and elsewhere, LATAM and other places as well. I mean, I generally, I've had co-founders at Gupshup as well. And usually I found that, new ideas usually work well with teams, because you need different perspectives. No one person can have I mean, building, it's like, building a startup requires a combination of skill sets that's really hard for anyone to master. So teams often tend to work well and better. Really, it was the key insight was if you're building mobile services and you want to reach billions of users, really the only way at that time was through text messaging or SMS, right? Because that's the lowest common denominator, works on every mobile device, and you can build rich services to communicate with billions of users, right? So that's what we started with, and we set up a cloud messaging platform that enterprises can use to send notifications, alerts, reminders, things like that to consumers. And of course, every time you do a banking transaction, or you shop on an e-commerce site, or book a flight, or book a hotel, and so on, or order food or a taxi, I mean, you get these notification alerts. And in the US, some of it is on email, some of it is on text messaging, but in the rest of the world, it's almost exclusively on mobile messaging. So it's a very, very high volume. And, so we are one of the largest platforms actually in the world in terms of volume of messages.
Wow.
And we handle, actually the current count is about 6-7 billion messages a month. So fairly sizable traffic. And so I think that's what we do. And the great thing about messaging now, so previously it was just text messaging, but these days now you have newer IP or internet protocol based messaging channels emerging, right? You can now, enterprises can send messages through WhatsApp to consumers, right. Or even we've launched something proprietary that we call GIP, which is short for Gupshup IP messaging channel, right? The point is, in all of these things, now you can have richer messages with images, with cards and buttons and conversational experiences, chatbots, AI-enabled chatbots, and so on. So messaging and bots are becoming sort of this new capability for businesses to engage their customers. It almost becomes the new sort of digital front door, right? And the analogy I like is in the mid-90s when websites came about, every business had to go out and build a website because that's how customers were going to find them. And now, every business is going to have to go out and build a conversational experience because, again, that's how consumers are going to, reach out to them and find them and so on. So they can use it for marketing, for sales, for customer support, you name it. But that's the big opportunity.
Yeah, because now it really is about conversational marketing. It's not just about just sending a message and that's it. A lot of it is about interaction. So, I can definitely see the obviously there's a very big demand, and I can see why you've received a lot of successful traction on your product and your application. Beerud, I want to talk about what it's like to scale a SaaS company, software as a service. Some people that I've had on the show, they have service-based businesses. For you, it looks like you're running more of a SaaS type company. How have you been able to really scale it to a point where the top line is increasing? Your ARR is always increasing, at least for the most part. I won't talk numbers. I'm not a big numbers guy by all means, but just more in essence of the elements of scalability. How did you scale your business and even Elance to get it to such a thriving company, to get recurring users and revenue on the platform? Because that's not easy to do. I've met so many entrepreneurs, and I have a lot of friends that do own product-based SaaS companies, and it's it's not that easy. It requires just heavy marketing and sales and just the way you operate your business. So if you can dive a little bit into that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's sort of there's different sort of tactics or strategies at different stages of growth, right? I mean, in general, I think right in the beginning, it's a lot of it is around product market fit, right? Do you have the right product that customers would like and use and so on? And even in our case, we had to evolve quite a bit because initially, we were using this messaging platform. We were running a consumer service, but for a variety of reasons, we couldn't subsidize it and monetize it and so on. So anyway, then we flipped to an enterprise product and started offering it to enterprises. So we had the scale, we had the technology, but the enterprises needed a few features, right? So that's where you listen very carefully to the customers, right? They need the ability to send messages in a certain way, receive reports, API integrations, all these capabilities. So some of that was, so you to just really listen carefully, do some trial and error around features, offer it, see if it fits well or not. That's the first aspect of it, right? The next aspect then is, what kind of SaaS, right? There's a lot of it. These are subscription SaaS models. Ours is a consumption SaaS, okay. Right? So what that means is as businesses use more, they consume more, they spend more. And therefore, we can have, even without new customer addition, even existing customers can drive revenue growth, right? So now it depends on the kind of business model and what it is, right? So if the value you're delivering can be a consumption-based model, then sometimes that can be better in some scenarios, right? It depends. So the very design of the business model and pricing can have an impact. I think beyond that, customer success is a really critical part of it. Making sure that new customers are onboarded correctly, and consumer adoption or customer adoption of our product typically goes through stages, right? So the first is they get adopted and understand the tools. Then they use it for one or two use cases. Then they do it for a few more. So there's really onboarding happening at every stage. It's a sort of a continuous onboarding, so to speak, right? Because there's newer capabilities, sort of as they call it, land and expand, right? Once you have a customer, you expand the interaction, the engagement with them. So that's important. I think customer support is also important when things are not going well. If people have issues, complaints, they have queries, I mean, we can enhance that, improve that, and so on. I think that makes a big difference. I think, infrastructure, I think technology infrastructure is a very critical part of it. You really have to invest a lot in it, because even the least bit of outage can cause loss of reputation. It can have a significant impact. So I have to be really careful with that as well. And lastly, I might add is just constant innovation. I mean, you have to keep bringing new ideas to the table, things that the customer is hearing first from you. And often, we found consistently that even if customers were not willing to switch, let's say if they have a competitive product, they may not switch because once they get settled in, the switching, people don't switch for no reason. But when there's a new thing that you're offering that others are not, then they're willing to try your system and then even switch the older product as well, right? So in our case, for example, we are the pioneers of IP-based messaging. And a lot of customers that may not use us for text messaging would use Gupshup for IP and then also migrate their SMS traffic to us. So it's really, they have to see you as leaders, as like stable, reliable, great feature set, and good innovators. So each of these things, and then of course, the power of the great thing about SaaS businesses is the power of compounding, right? So sometimes it may look like slow growth, but over a few years, it just adds up. And, if you're growing at 30, 40, 50% year over year, I mean, once you look at it after 5 or 10 years, I mean, it just becomes an insanely large number. So a little bit of patience also is required.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And part of your scaling journey, Beerud, did you, I mean, from what I read and understood, it looks like you guys did get VC capital and VC funding as well as part of the journey. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, sure. At Gupshup, I mean, at both companies, right? At UpWork and at Gupshup, we've raised quite a bit of money. So at Gupshup, we've raised $50 million so far, cumulative. But again, think of it, right? The last round was about 10 years ago. So we've been kind of profitable since then. We've been operating in this is unlike many other tech companies. I think we've been running, like a sustainable business. And now, I think we're looking at raising more money to scale up even faster and so on. So I think, but yeah, it's important to, be able to build scale sustainable businesses because that allows you to, invest more in business, to sort of control your destiny. You don't do optimize for the short term. You can think longer term and scale it up. Yeah.
And what was it like, back 10 years ago, or even before that, when you did acquire capital or require funding, sorry, when you did acquire funding, what was the process like trying to attract those investors? Was it after you received a lot of traction on the product, after you started to see a lot of success, because then it was a lot easier to attract the right type of investors? Or were you able to get funding before you were even, getting successful traction on the application, on the system?
Oh, there were multiple rounds of funding. So the answer is all of the above, right? I mean, obviously in the seed stage of funding is really just people are betting on the team, right? The team and the idea, because all it is a PowerPoint deck and so on. But successive rounds, and they're looking at least for a product, right? And then after that, of course, product and traction, customer adoption and so on, right? So, and in addition to that, we've had to, occasionally do pivots as well, right? I mean, you're going in one direction, it's not working. Now you need to change course. So ultimately, I think you want to raise money from investors that understand how these things go. I mean, sometimes, what you think you would start with is not where you end up. And they need to be, they need to have perspective themselves. I mean, if you have investors that get anxious with these kind of changes, then that's not going to work either. So we were fortunate enough to get, not just get funding, but get funding from the right kind of people that would be supportive, understanding, and the same thing, right? When something doesn't work, okay, what didn't work? How would we fix it? What else could we do differently? What are the things that are working? You do more of that and scale the other stuff. So it's really, it's a fundraising can be tricky. And yeah, the unfortunate thing is sometimes, people who really need it but have no track record, then it's hard for them to do any fundraising. And later on, when they're successful, and don't need money, everybody's willing to give them money, right? So it's a little bit of a feast and famine kind of sort of dynamic there. But that's because it's inherently risky, right? So you really, when it's a completely unknown entity and an entrepreneur, I mean, you really don't know how they'll react in different situations. So that's why oftentimes, people with a track record find it easier, right? So then the question is, how does somebody break in? And I think there, I mean, for a young entrepreneur, sometimes if they have tried and found it difficult, one option is to actually work in some other startup, sort of learn the tricks of the trade, build relationships, because almost always, the relationships lead to newer business interactions and so on. Exactly because it's such a deeply personal exercise, right? You really have to know that person has the ability, and the agility and the nimbleness and the grit and determination and the intelligence to be able to deal with whatever the startup journey throws at them.
I love it. No, you're so right. It's very, very true. And I think this is actually a good segue, because I do have a few more questions, but I want to talk, Beerud, a little bit about the struggle that you've probably seen other, business leaders, other CEOs, other entrepreneurs go through as well, along with some of the things that you've gone through, some of the obstacles and struggles that you've experienced as well. Can you name some of your toughest challenges that you and even other people have gone through that's very similar? Like, have you been going through some similar obstacles and challenges that some other business leaders and entrepreneurs have also gone through, and how have you really overcome them?
Oh yeah, I think, so I'd say for any business, any startup in particular, I think maybe the toughest challenge is a near death, and I mean a business death experience, right? And businesses can die for a variety of reasons. The commonest usually is just running out of funds, right? And that happens again because, maybe you can't build a product, or you can't assemble a team, or it's the customers aren't adopting it, or it's not scaling fast enough, and you can't get new investors, and you're not profitable yet, and you're burning cash day after day, and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, those are things that are sort of at least somewhat in your control, but sometimes it can even be external factors, right? I mean, when, let's say, the market collapses, right, where it's impossible to get new funding, and a lot of businesses stop spending money, right, and on your product and so on, right? So in 2001, 2008, maybe even last year in some industries, I mean, these are sort of external shocks that are through no fault of yours, can really impact businesses quite significantly, right? So those are the toughest challenges, and I've gone through those multiple times. I mean, I've lived through all of these financial crises that I talked about, as well as sort of internal pivots where something just wasn't working and we had to completely change course. Those can be or kind of nearly running out of cash and so on, right? Those can be really challenging, sort of gut-wrenching situations. I mean, they really, even for the most experienced entrepreneur, they can be really cause sleepless nights and a ton of stress and anxiety, right? And the way to deal with it, I guess, at least a couple of things, right? One is I've found there's something called the serenity prayer, which is give me the courage to change the things I can.
That's true.
The
Yeah,
patience.
I know that prayer. Yeah, I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Patience to accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So you don't worry about things outside your control. You focus on the things that are in your control, what you can do, how you react, how you respond to it, and so on. And then, your team, your employees look at it, your potential investors look at it, and there are different scenarios, right? In one case, we had enough cash, but when the 2000 crisis hit, so we had to sort of cut back on the team, we had to cut back on the projects, we switched from consumer side to enterprise side. A lot of those things, I think even at Gupshup, we had to pivot from one kind of business to another, and refocus and so on. And in every one of these cases, right, I mean, it's not just you, but you have to take your team along, and it can be a lot of dispute, debate, and stuff like that. And I think even there, just being authentic, being honest with the team, saying, look, this is what we know. I mean, it may be stressful. I don't like it either, but it is what it is. What are we going to do about it now? Right. Not so I think that's super critical to deal with. So yeah, I think some of these take time and take effort, and just a lot of stress, but that's where the grit, the determination, the perseverance, sort of really matters. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you very much for that. That was a great answer. I think a lot of people will really learn from that. Very, very inspiring. Thank you so much, Beerud. So this is my last question. This is a perfect segue for this as well. Is for all that you've been through, Beerud, your successes, your failures, just through the entire journey, your career. How would you define your story in just one word? If you had to choose one word to define your story.
Wow. Well, I think I would just boil it down to grit, and now, there's a lot of, I mean, look, for example, I was blessed with an exceptional academic background, so I could say smarts could be important. But the funny thing is, in business, you're not solving calculus problems every day, right? I mean, it's really not that complex. It needs a lot more EQ. It needs a lot more, I mean, to me, really, what it boils down to is, grit, determination, perseverance to, keep at it. That alone is not enough, but that's really the most important factor, because that leads to other things. You're always thinking, you're thinking differently. What can I do? And so on. So I think it really, that's if I had to pick one word, that would be it. Yeah.
Love it. Awesome. And Beerud, where can everyone find you? Your, I guess, website or social media, or where's the best place for everyone to find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very, the fringe benefit of an unusual name like mine is that I get it on every namespace without having to add any numbers or anything to it. It's just Beerud, whether on Twitter, on Gmail, on almost, on Facebook. I mean, any namespace, even on Google, you'll only find one of me. So I'm not very hard to find.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This was an honor. I really appreciate it, Beerud. And again, this is Michael Giorgio, your host on Tales from the Pros. And until next time, thank you, everyone. Please subscribe to our YouTube page and also follow our social media. There are links somewhere around here. But we really appreciate it, guys. Thanks for all the support. And I'm going to be giving you awesome content continuously. And we look forward to seeing you soon.